You're listening to the Call Kent podcast, where Kent C. Dodds answers questions and gives insights to software engineers like you. Now, let's hear the call.
Hi Kent, Paulo here. I know you are mainly a Remix guy, and I mainly use SvelteKit, but I think this question applies to every meta framework. So in the old era, when we were building mainly in client-side application, end-to-end testing was a bit simpler, because if you wanted to mock an API call, you could just monkey patch fetch and call it a day. Today, I think the line has a bit shifted, because both Remix and SvelteKit let you control the server just like the client. And luckily, we have libraries like a mock service worker that allows you to mock both on the client and on the server, which also allow you to have a much better strategy than monkey patch fetch. But the problem here is that, for example, if you're in your server, you are not doing an API call to get the data, but you are querying a DB. I don't think this is possible to mock with mock service worker. So do you have any insight of this? Because for the moment, I resorted to I isolate all my queries in separate functions inside a single JavaScript module. And with Vite, I basically change the alias of that module to point to a different file during testing that exports the same functions, but with mock data. But I don't think it's a very good and easy to grasp strategy. So I wanted to know if you have any ideal strategy for this.
And that was the call. Here's what Kent had to say.
Hey, Paulo, thank you so much for the question. This has definitely been on my mind a lot over the last couple of years, is just as you described. When we use a framework that is full stack by design, what constitutes a test for ourselves and the definitions of different tests kind of changes a little bit. For one, first I'm going to establish I am super not interested in mocking my own endpoints. If I've got a server rendered app and I've got an action or a loader or whatever, I'm not going to be testing my client side stuff with MSW mocking the API calls that the framework is making to my own code. That just doesn't make any sense to me at all. And so I do not use MSW in the client or for any testing of client side fetch requests that are made by the framework. And so the challenge, though, is that my actions and my loaders are hitting a database, and in testing, what do we do about that? And so I have found that, as you've observed, my testing trophy has grown a little top heavy, and I'm using more end-to-end tests than I was before. What I do is, because I'm using SQLite, it actually isn't a big challenge to just have SQLite be handling all the regular requests and stuff. So for my end-to-end test with Playwright, I actually have it use the development database. I kind of like having the development beta, the database that I use as I'm developing that SQLite database be the same one that I'm using when I'm running Playwright. And so that's what I do. And you can find that how that all works in the Epic stack. So that setup is actually pretty simple because it's I don't really have to change anything between whether I'm developing or testing those end-to-end tests. But there are lower level tests as well. And so we have some integration tests in there. And for those, I actually create a test database for each individual test thread. So vtest is making a bunch of processes for all the tests. Each one of those makes a copy of the database before they run. It's just a copy of the empty database that has all of the seeded data, like the important data, so like the different roles there are and stuff like that. Basically, it's a database that has all the migrations run on it. That's what it is. And so it makes a copy of that database for that test. And because it's SQLite, it takes like milliseconds to copy that file, and then we can run all the tests, and each process has its own database that it's running, and then when that test process is done, it deletes the database file, and it's awesome. I actually teach how to do all of this stuff in Epic Web in the testing workshop, so you can take a look at that if you're interested. Yeah, so that's how I go about it. It does help that I'm using SQLite, so it's so much easier. But yeah, it definitely can be a lot more tricky if you're using Postgres, and now you have to have like a Docker image and ready to like copy for all of your database tests and stuff if you wanted to do the same thing. Or if you're using like PlanetScale and stuff, like what do you even do? And so it does get more complicated when you're using more complicated tools, but SQLite is pretty great, and not just because it's simple, but it is production ready, and that has been proven over and over and over again. And I'm just shouting from the rooftops, people, simplify your lives, use SQLite. I realize that not everybody can, but if you can, then this is the way. So all of that said, if you can't use SQLite, or like it's a migration that you just cannot stomach or whatever, then what do you do about these database calls? Because you're right, MSW is not really going to work out for mocking those types of things. Now, to be clear, I actually do use MSW for any third-party APIs my server is communicating with. I absolutely do that. And in fact, in the Epic stack, we have like the GitHub API, we have the Resend API. We're talking to a couple third parties, and yeah, we do mock those out with MSW, both in development as well as in testing, and it's great. And you can take a look at how I do that. But yeah, as far as the database, if you cannot just make a test database in milliseconds for each individual test run, then what do you do? And I actually feel like what you're suggesting that you've done is a pretty reasonable solution, even though, yeah, I hate it. So I'm not like, it's kind of a pain to have to say, okay, we can't touch the database anywhere except in this module, and we have to make sure that our mock of this module is accurate. That stinks, but I can't really think of a reasonable alternative to doing that. So yeah, it's stupid, but if I mean, you definitely can spin up a test database using Postgres or something, like if that's the database you're using. Some people have suggested using SQLite for the testing and Postgres for the production database. And while that is possible with ORMs and things, I really don't think that's a very good idea, because then you limit your abilities of using just the things that are similar between the two. So if there's a capability Postgres has that SQLite doesn't, then you can't use that capability because your test will break. And like, sure, you can do that today and get that all set up and you're happy, but tomorrow your coworker is not going to realize that they're going to break something, or that they can't use this thing, or your new hire is not going to realize they can't use this feature of your database. So I really don't think that it's a very good idea. And in addition to that, like, you want to simulate the real world, and you're not using SQLite if your production database is a Postgres database. So yeah, there are a bunch of things, but like, it's possible with Prisma that you could use Prisma extensions to help to accomplish some of this mocking as well. So you just have this a Prisma extension that talks to a fake database. That is a possibility that like you could make something like that work. Pretty confident that would actually work. But I haven't looked into that either. So if you are using Prisma, then maybe something like that would work. Anyway, I am sorry that I can't be more helpful. But yeah, if you can use SQLite, then do that, because it's much simpler. It scales extremely well, and that's everything that I'm teaching is about how to use SQLite, and it just makes my life better. I hope that is helpful to you, Paulo. Good luck on all of the stuff that you're working on. Cheers.
This has been the Call Kent podcast. Learn more about Kent at kentcdodds.com and get your own questions answered at kentcdodds.com/calls.